Welcome to another City and Guilds math lesson. I am Tamika Lodge Fenton, and I will be guiding you through today. We'll be focusing on conversions between fractions and percentages. Let's begin. So we're on the unit that talks about conversion between common fractions, decimal fractions, and percentages. The aim of this unit is to allow the learner to convert and use decimal fractions, common fractions, and percentages. However, for today's lesson, we are going to be converting among decimal fractions, common fractions, and percentages, and apply as see fit. All right, let us recap a few important points. An equal part of a whole can be represented numerically. Now, three of those representations are as common fractions, a decimal fraction, and also as a percentage. Let us review what are fractions. So when we talk about common fractions, a fraction tells what part of a whole object has been given characteristics or characteristic. So if you look at this example, you have that circle fraction there, and you see yellow and you see blue. Now, half of the circle is blue. I gave it something, I made it different from the other side. And I could also say half of the circle is yellow. Then you can look at the other circular representation. A quarter of the circle is red. It's the only part of that circle that's red. I've given it some character. All right? It says now a fraction tells what part of the group has been given the same characteristic. All right, so I have, what's that? 5 cookies, and 3 out of those 5 cookies are chocolate chip. I could also go to say, so I could say 3/5 of the cookies are chocolate chip. I could even say 2/5 of the cookies are butter cookie or sugar cookie or yellow cookies. Those cookies don't even look like cookies. Let us look at the next thing that we have here. So we have 4 fractional representation using you have circle, rectangle, and you have a triangle there, and a square. So it says half. Now let's talk about the half in the first example. Half of the circle is shaded red, or I can say half of the circle is unshaded, depending on what perspective I want to look at it. Here now you see 3/4. There's only one way I can talk about that 3/4. 3/4 of the whole is shaded green, or I could just say shaded. Then you have 2 halves. I could talk about the unshaded part of the 2/4. Where did I get 2 halves? 2/4 of that whole, I can talk about it as a shaded portion, or I can talk about the unshaded portion. Let's just look at the 4th example now. You see 2/3. 2/3 is shaded pink. That's the only option I have there, because the other part that's not shaded is not 2/3. So of course your fractional numbers tell you something about the whole. It talks about a particular portion of the whole. Decimal fractions. So a decimal fraction is a fraction whose denominator is 10 or a multiple of 10, like 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, and we could continue multiplying by 10. All right, let us look at what a decimal fraction really means. All right, so here we have a part of the number is a whole, so you see 17, and you would say 48 hundredths. So that 4, which is to the right of the decimal point, really represents 4 out of 10. So what we're saying, the whole would have been divided into 10 parts, and we would have highlighted, given characteristic to 4 of those parts. As you can see, 4 out of the 10 parts is shaded, and that's why I would say that's 4/10. Let's look at the digit 8, which is in the hundredths place. What we're saying, if the whole was divided into 100 parts, that 8 there would represent 8 out of the 100 parts. Hence why it is 8 hundredths. Go back to the whole. There's no division there. You have 17 wholes, and they're not divided up in anything. Hence why you have the 17 to the left of your decimal point. All right. So here, look at some of our decimals. Now you have what 0.1, the correct way to call that is 1/10. The fractional representation, 1 fraction bar, 10. Then you have 0.01, it is 1/100th, it is 1 out of 100 parts. 0.001 is 1,000th, and it's 1 out of 1,000 parts. All right? Now, what is a percentage? A percentage is a special fraction because this fraction is always out of 100. So the symbol backslash with the 2 zeros on opposite sides says per 100. For example, 47% is simply another way of saying 47/100th, and that is out of 100, 47 out of 100. So of course, when you think about fractions, you are always thinking about a ratio with 100 being the other part of the ratio. So here, let's look at some simple percentages. If you pay attention to the circle, the first circle is all black. 0% of it has been, if you can remember when you're downloading something, it sometimes shows you this on your phone. 0% is downloaded, 0 out of the 100%. 25%, you see that little part, 25 out of the 100. 50%, halfway download. And then you have 100%, the entire circle is blue, and 100% is 100 out of 100. All right? Conversions now. A fraction can be equated to a decimal fraction. So a common fraction can be equated to a decimal fraction, as well as it can also be equated to a percentage. So we can convert from common fraction to decimal fraction to percentage, and vice versa. All right, so let's just look at a few examples. A percent can be expressed as a decimal or a fraction. So here we have 50% of the pizza is eaten. Now, I can also say half of the pizza is eaten and represent that as a fraction. Or as a decimal fraction, 0.5, or what we say 5/10 of the pizza have been eaten. All right? So a half, let's go back to that. 50% is the same as 0.5 or 5/10, and it is also the same as half. All right. A quarter. So pizza almost finished. A quarter of the pizza is left. Can't say a quarter is eaten, only a quarter is left. All right, so we have a quarter can be written as a decimal to be 25/100ths. We don't normally say 2/10 and 5/100. So it's 25/100ths, and the percentage would be 25%. And we know that can also, if you look at 25 out of 100, it would simplify to give you a quarter. So here again, we have another example. 1/5 can also be written as 20%. And then you have it can be written as 2/10. Right, which is 0.2 there. All right, and you have 2/5. So remember now, we know the 1/5 was what? 20%. 2/5 makes sense, 40%. So the whole is now looked at from 100. And what we would have said is from 100, and if I were to change a 2/5 to 100, let's see what would happen, why I get that 40%. So I have 2/5, and I want to make it a decimal fraction. Now a decimal fraction must be out of 100, or any, what you call it, the denominator must be a multiple of 10. What must I do to 5 to get it to 10? I would multiply it by 2. And you know this by now, whatever you do to your denominator, you do it to your numerator. 2 times 2 gives me 4. So we have 4/10. See the 4/10 there? You should know how to write 4/10. 0.4. Now what if I want it out of 100? What can I do to 10 to make it 100? I multiply it by 10. If I multiply both numerator and denominator by 10, I get 40. And if you know if it's out of 100, this simply means 40%. And that's pretty much how you would look at working through the fraction to percentages to decimals. All right. right. Sorry about that, guys. Let us go to the next slide. So we have decimal to fractions here. We have 0.8. We can change it to a fraction here, and it is 8/10. As I said before, if we not just call the digits, but call the decimal fractions as they are actually named, it will be much easier to convert them. This is 8/10, and it will be 8 out of 10 parts, and we can simplify that to give us a common fraction. So 8 and 10 has 2 as a common factor. 2 into 8 4 times, 2 into 10 5 times. So as you can see, you have 4/5 as your fraction for the decimal 8/10. Then you have 4 and 2/10. Now remember, when the number appears to the left of the decimal, it is a whole. And as you can see there, it is 4 wholes and 2/10. You can simplify 2/10 to give you 1/5. So 4 and 2/10 is the same as 4 and 1/5. And you can see therefore 5 and 12/100. So it's 5 wholes and 12/100 parts. And you can simplify 12/100 to give you 3/25. All right, guys. Fractions to percent. When we're converting a fraction to a percent, we multiply the fraction by 100 to convert it to the percent. Did we do that over there? Or we can make the denominator out of 100 as well. So here, let's do it this way though. Let's multiply by 100. So we have 2/5, we're multiplying by 100 because percentages is out of 100. And you would simplify where possible for 2/5. 5 can be factorized out of the 100 20 times. 20 times 2 gives us 40. So it's 40% there. Then you have 3/7. And as you can see there, there's no factor between 7 and 100 or 7 and 3. So you multiply straight across. 3 multiplied by 100 is 300. Divided by 7, you get 42 and 86/100. That reads 42, decimal point 86%. Then you have 3 3/4, and you do the same thing. You multiply by 100. However, when you have a mixed number, in order to do the calculations easier, you will change the mixed number to an improper fraction. And how do we do that? We multiply the denominator by the number of wholes we have. So 4 multiplied by 3 gives us 12. 12 plus 3 gives us 15. And then you multiply throughout, 375%. And here you have 9/2. And you know that's an improper fraction right there. So you know you're going to have more than 100%. And when you do the calculations, 450%. Okay, so percent to fraction, you can also look at it here. You have 28%. It is 28 out of 100, and you pretty much simplify that 28 out of 100. Because remember, percentage is a special kind of fraction. It's out of 100. So all you have to do is put it out of 100 and you simplify. 7/25 is the same as 28%. And this table is just to help you realize how we can convert from one to the other. So fractions, we're starting here with 3/4 or 3/4. Divide the numerator by the denominator is a simple way to get it to the decimal fraction. So 3 divided by 4 gives me 75/100. And then to change it to a percentage, I multiply the 75/100, 0.75 by 100, giving me 75%. Then I now have a percentage, 40%, and I want to make it a decimal. I divide by 100. So 40/100 is 0.4 as a decimal, and write it as a fraction. We are now 40 out of 100, and we pretty much simplify, and you would end up with 2/5. All right. So here are just a few of the common decimals and percentages and fractions out there. After a while, these things should become a bit automated because you would have worked with them so many times. For instance, 50%, 0.5 as a decimal, it's half as a fraction. 50% of the pizza gone, half of it gone, man. And the decimal that represent that would be 5/10, or some may say 50/100. And then you have 25%. So 25% is half of a half. So that would be 25. So you have 0.5 there, 0.25 there. If you were to add 0.25 and 0.25, you'd get 0.5. Then you have quarter is half of a half. I know, but yes, a quarter of the whole is 25%. Then you have 75%. It can be represented as a decimal as 75/100 or 0.75. And of course, as a fraction, 3/4. Now remember, let's just do that one on the board to show the conversion there. So you have 3/4. All right, so you have 3/4 there. Oh my. So you have 3/4, and we did say that this can be represented as a multiple of. If I want to change it to a percentage, I can see what I have to do to get it to 100. I'd multiply this by 25, multiply this by 25, that would be 75. So I know that this is 75%. 75%, right? So I'm going to put 75% right there. And then now, if I want to change this to, what was that, fraction to a percentage, I got the percentage, I got the fraction to a decimal. If I say 75/100, you should know that 75/100 is written like that. But if you're not sure, you can always do this. 4 divided into 3. So 4 divided into 3, 0. 4 into 30. 4 into 30 goes 7 times. And that would give us 28. And, all right, we're going to short it. All right, 2. And then 4 into 20 there goes 5. So as you can see, either you divide the numerator by the denominator, which give you 0.75, or what we call 75/100. Those are ways, this is a little bit jucked here. Those are the ways we can convert or common fraction to percentage. Ooh, that's some horrible handwriting. And then to a decimal. All right. So let us continue here. Let us explore when we convert. My brother and I both got individual pizzas for lunch. I ate 3/8 of mine, and he had 1/125,000th of his, or 0.125 of his. Who had more pizza left? How are we going to work this now? What must we do? Yes, the first thing you need to do is to have both portions represented in the same form of representation. So I have one as a fraction, a common fraction, and I have one as a decimal fraction. Let's take them to the same. So either decimal fractions or common fractions. Let's do it together. So 3/8 can be written as 375 out of 1,000. And that would give me 0.375 or 375,000th, which is larger than 125,000th. So right away, the 3/8 is a larger portion. So my brother has more of his cake or pizza left than I do, because I would have eaten more. All right, so there you go. Now I could also look at the decimal as a fraction. So 125,000th can be simplified to give me 1/8, and 1/8 is less than 3/8. So I would simply know that my brother would have had more left out of his whole. So here we go. It's time to look at the City and Guilds exam questions. Let's look at the first question. A cake is cut into 10 slices. 4 slices are eaten. What is this number as a percentage of the cake? So let's look at what is given and then see how we're going to get it to percentage. So the first thing they tell us that the cake is cut into 10 slices. So the whole is 10. The whole is divided into 10 parts, and 4 of those parts is eaten. So the fraction that represents the eaten portion is 4/10. Now we want to see the percentage here. Now percentage, remember percentage is a special fraction out of 100. So I can find an equivalent fraction to 4/10, where the denominator is 100 parts. All right, so I'm going to equate it to another fraction out of 100. What would I have to do to 10 to get it to 100? Yes, I would multiply it by 10. And you know by now, if I'm multiplying the denominator by 10, I most definitely must multiply the numerator. So 10 times 10 gives me 100. That's good. 4 times 10 gives me 40. Right away, 40 out of 100, you know this. This is 40%. All right? And you have option D. So there we go. All right. So let's look at the next question. A quality inspector checks a batch of 50 shirts. 4 of the shirts fail the quality check. What is the number as a percentage of the batch? So again, we need to see what information is given in the question. So it says the quality inspector checked a batch of 50 shirts. So 50 is the whole, 50 shirts I'm checking, you know. How many of the shirts fail? 4 of the shirts. 4 of the shirts fail. Now it's asking, what is this number as a percentage for the batch? So we have 50. We have 4/50. All right. So we want to change this to a percentage. So we would like to represent, so let's try it another way then. Let us multiply the fraction by 100. All right, because remember, percentages out of 100. So I don't know why my 50 is so massive. Let us fix that. So let us simplify where possible and see if that will work. So we have 50 can be factorized out of 100 and out of itself 1 time. 50 into 100 2 times. If I were to multiply, we have 8. So that would look like 8%. Well, let's check it to see if we can do it another way. So remember what I've been doing. I have been finding an equivalent fraction out of 100. Let's just see if it's the same. If I had 50 as my whole, how do I get it to 100 parts? I'd have to split all those 50 parts into 2 parts. So I'll multiply by 2, giving me 100. Whatever I do to the denominator, I must do to the numerator. 4 times 2 gives me 8, and that's 8 out of 100. And you know by now, percentages is out of 100. So 800 is the same as 8%. So either way is correct, guys. Either way that you want to look at it is correct. So your option would be option A. All right. Last question for the afternoon. What is 75% expressed as a fraction? Here we have 75 out of 100, and we're just going to simply simplify it. And 25 into 75 goes 3 times, and 25 into 100 goes 4 times. So 75% is the same as 3/4 All right, awesome. And that will be option C. That's all the time we have for today's math lesson. Remember, wash your hands, sanitize, wear your mask, and continue to stay safe.